So yeah, I wanted to come out with this video here tonight and kind of rush it through, is because a lot of people are out there just slamming the GTX 1080 for being even in the same realm as the Fury X. And, you know, this is not a very good comparison. I mean, you're talking about AMD's Titan class graphics card versus essentially Nvidia's mid-range, their high mid-range card. And everybody's just up in arms about this. Granted, AMD, you know, it's a good showing by AMD. Kudos to them for at least, you know, hanging in there at 4K and in DirectX 12. But, you know, it's just not a fair comparison, I think. What do you think on that?
Well, I think you make a good point. You are talking two different classes of video cards, but I still see a problem in the sense that this is the 1080 and the 1070, the specs with which were just released, is supposed to be outclassing a Titan X, just barely. At least it's, you know, marginally better. You know, nothing fantastic, but it's supposed to perform better. So if you were to compare the Titan X to a Fury and then know that there's the 1070, which is just barely better than the Titan X, and then the 1080 is supposed to far surpass the Titan X, but when you compare the Fury X to the 1080, it's really not that far behind. It makes you kind of wonder. I mean, I get what you're saying in terms of different classes of video cards, but my biggest concern is then DirectX 12 is going to be a huge, huge boon for AMD, because if you look at some of the benchmarks and stuff that you sent me, and I was going through it, and you're right, under DirectX 12, the AMD card was hanging in there. I mean, it was only 6 to 8 frames behind for some of it. I mean, granted, there were other instances where it was definitely further behind. But it was still mostly in the ballpark, which was really surprising. So if a Fury X can run on DirectX 12 and be that close, I just got to wonder what we're going to see when Vega releases later this year. I mean, I can't imagine the 1080 is going to compete. That's kind of where I'm going. I'm looking forward to the next release, not Polaris, because we know that's going to be, you know, more budget style, but I'm talking Vega, and I'm more looking forward to that. Less about the comparison of the Fury X as a card versus card, more of what does it mean for the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Vega will probably spank the 1080. However, Vega is not really meant to compete with the 1080. Maybe some variant of it is. Vega's going to be fighting against the new Titan A, B, C, D. I don't know what they're going to call it. They used X and Z already, which are the cool letters. So whatever the new Titan's going to be, they're going to be going against that and the 1080 Ti. Now with AMD moving up the release date to October, I don't know. I don't think Nvidia was ready for that, and because the 1080 Ti and the Titan whatever, that's what we're going to call it. We're going to call it the Titan WTF until somebody comes out with proper naming for it. But until that comes out, I think they were supposed to come out early next year, like spring sometime. So I don't know if they can move up their timeline fast enough to catch up to AMD.
Yeah, but I think the question is really, what can we realistically expect? You know, if you went with a 980 versus, I guess, a Titan, I mean, your performance gain is what? Somewhere in the range of 40%, if not more?
So somewhere's around there, yeah.
Right. So we're talking a 980 to a Titan only got us 40%. But when you compare, I guess I'm just looking at it in terms of, so let's say we're diminishing returns notwithstanding, if they can get a 1080 or Ti or a new version of the Titan that's going to be based off the 1080 and get a 40% bump, is that still going to be worth or even comparable to a Vega? And I mean value at that point, because it looks like with AMD and their ability to use DirectX 12 more efficiently than the Nvidia at this point, the performance gains alone from jumping to a Vega, assuming form follows function there, that you're going to see a large bump, and the Vega is going to outclass the 1080. And then the question is then, is the Titan or the Ti going to be able to bring that back in line to enough of a degree to make it worthwhile for their price point? Because historically, your Ti's, your Titan X's, they break the bank. Those are huge, huge cards that are, you know, incredibly expensive. And AMD, I mean, if the Polaris is going to be the lower end, $150, $200 range.
Well, that's speculation. That's purely speculation.
You're
on
right.
my part.
You're right. That is speculation. But even if it's in the range of $300 for a Polaris card, and the Vega is going to be the high end, I mean, is the Vega going to cost $1,000? I somehow doubt it.
No, but the Fury X is what, $700 right now. So that's not out of their price point line.
No, 700 isn't, but a Titan is. It's a 900. It's $1,000 card, or was. So my point is, like, Nvidia is typically more expensive. Their cards have been the standard of the industry, but it looks like, and this is still complete speculation, but just going off the benchmarks I was seeing, what I'm seeing is that AMD is well positioned to use DirectX 12 to surpass Nvidia in terms of performance, and I don't see Nvidia being able to hold their price point if they're going to come out with a new Titan or Ti or whatever, and still compete with a card that might cost only $650, $700. Do you see what I'm saying? Like that's my concern. Like, how are they going to reconcile that? I just see that as being a problem.
Well, with AMD coming out first, at least that gives NVIDIA time to see what they need to produce to be competitive. They're clearly going to be second to the top tier party. But getting back to the 1080, with the hard numbers that we have now, I do find it impressive that across the board, it just spanks everything. It does win in every single category. The fact that it's so energy efficient too, which is great, because if you look at the energy efficiency, it's about in line with the 980. Pretty much watt for watt, it's right there, and it's delivering roughly 60 to 70% performance gains, which is really, to me, that's pretty amazing. Is a 60 to 70% for exact same power usage. That's great. That's some great efficiency gains there.
Isn't that what we should expect in a new generation of cards?
I don't know. 60% gains, that's pretty large. But
when we went from Kepler to Maxwell, we jumped a huge number then. I mean, I feel like, it's impressive, don't get me wrong. I like the numbers. They're big, they're gaudy, and they make me go, oh, wow. But isn't that what we should expect? To me, that just seems like what we should expect. And I shouldn't be oogling over it. Okay, new generation, this is what we get. Buy a new card, pretty standard procedure. There's nothing jumping out at me that says this is an incredible achievement. It's not. At least nothing that I haven't seen before. Just, am I making sense at all there?
Yeah, Maxwell was impressive because it was still a 28 nanometer node. And they actually got, I think, maybe 20% power efficiency gain. But see, that's 20%. AMD hasn't had a power efficiency gain in God knows how long. They just keep pumping more juice into their video cards. That's why Polaris is supposed to be a big deal for them. So, no, this isn't standard. This isn't something we've seen in the past 2 or 3 years at the very least. So to gain that much performance, it was expected with the FinFET 16 nanometer, process drop. So we were kind of expecting it, but it's still nice to actually see it come to fruition instead of them going, yeah, it's going to be so efficient, and then they just squander it, and it's a horribly inefficient CPU. So I guess getting what you expected is now a win, in my book.
Oh, and you're right, and that's a horrible trend, and that's across pretty much anything, gaming platforms, the games themselves, and the technology. You're right, getting what you should get is almost kind of shocking. But I guess, power efficiency, speaking as a not nearly as technical gamer as you are, do I fucking care? Not one bit. I really don't. I don't care if my total power draw is 120 watts versus 90 watts, and I'm just random numbers throwing out there. I don't really care. It doesn't change anything for me. If anything, of course, yes, I can get a smaller power supply, but really nothing changes for me if it draws more or less. You can say it's more efficient, and that's great, but if the performance is there, I don't give a fuck how much power it draws.
See, and
I really don't.
And I guess that's the other side. That's the other argument, especially on the enthusiast side, is, I don't care if I'm drawing 2,000 watts out of my wall. I don't care. I don't care if it costs me $20 every time I turn my computer on. And there's a lot of people that don't. There's a lot of people that are... Me personally, I like that happy medium where, I'm not pumping out, 200 degrees of heat every hour into my room. I kind of like my power efficiency, so I do like seeing that.
Listen, I live in the Northwest. It's nice to have the extra heat source. You know what I mean?
Well, there you go. I'm kind of in the middle, so it's hot sometimes here. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, if we could ever design a computer that'll shoot out cold air, that'd be great.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on from there, the 4K performance is something else that I did want to talk about. This is an area that I was completely underwhelmed. I was really hoping we would finally, and some websites will tell you that the 1080 will run 4K. It will not do 4K.
All right. Wait a minute. All right. Just to split hairs, will it run 4K? I mean, yes. Will you get 20 frames per second out of it? 25, maybe 30? Is that playable? Sure. Is it worthwhile? No. And I think I get what you're saying there, but I just wanted to make that clear.
Well, I know. I mean, from the benchmarks, most games will play all right. Of course, these websites, and by the way, all the links for everything that I'm discussing is going to be down below. But, these websites, they're using ultra settings. They're really pushing it. If you turn the settings down, you could probably make it work. However, to me, 60 frames per second is bare minimum. When I see a minimum frame rate, that needs to be 60 or higher. I use a 144 hertz monitor. Of course, they don't have that in 4K yet. But still, I'm used to 60 frames is your absolute minimum. The worst this game should ever do is 60 frames. I want maximums usually somewhere around 170 and averages obviously around 144. Now, granted, this is 4K, but we're not even hitting an average of 60.
That's the problem. I agree with you there, and I was definitely thinking the same thing going through this information, and I'm like, I thought this was supposed to be it. I thought we were supposed to finally see 4K kind of become the norm, or at least, within reach. And I feel like it's not. And that's not good for me. 4K has been dangled in front of my face like a carrot. And I, as the diligent horse, have been walking the treadmill thinking one day we'll get there. And we're still not there. And that's ridiculous to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, the original Titan, not the Titan X, not the Titan Black, not the Titan Z, the original Titan, that was the first GPU that was touted as, oh yeah, it can do 4K. So ever since the original Titan launched, this same carrot has been in front of us the whole time. And I mean, off the top of my head, I can't even remember how long ago that was. It's got to be at least 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
Same carrot.
Probably 3.
3, 4. I mean, that was Kepler based. It was after the 680. Yeah, the original Titan launched after the 680 and before the 780 because basically the 780 was the cut down version.
Right.
Whenever that is. But, yeah, so this carrot, like you said, has been dangled in front of us, and we're still not there yet. It's like, Jiminy Christmas. We have to wait for another high-end class GPU.
Yeah, because it's being advertised on a technicality. And maybe you and I'm kind of in agreement with you for the most part. Maybe we are being snobbish about the fact that if it doesn't give me 60 frames per second or 60 frames per second on average, it's really not what I would consider to be 4K or true or worth my time. But there are other gamers out there who are okay with 30 frames per second. They perhaps feel it's a more cinematic experience. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure they have a PlayStation or an Xbox.
This is also possible. I'm just saying there are gamers out there who are willing to settle for less. Personally, though, and I think you'll agree with me, it's not worth your money if it doesn't get you the 60 frames per second.
Yes, but I mean, these are the people that don't plunk down $600-700 for a video card, or they shouldn't be. If you're cool with 30 frames per second, please do not buy. In fact, just go buy a PlayStation 4. Actually, wait for the PS4 Neo to come out, and then get a PS4 for like $150. That's really the best way to go. All right, but we're not talking about those people. We're talking about the people that do spend $700 on a video card.
Well, but that's my thing. I think some of those people will spend the money just to say they have it, just to say they run 4K. And I feel like you are wasting your problem, and you're kind of part of the problem if you're willing to accept that kind of performance as being okay. I'm not.
Yeah, no, I agree. Moving past 4K, though, I am, however, really shocked at the 1440p performance. I think that's really where the 1080. I was about to call it the 1080p. Still can't believe that. I still can't believe that they went with that naming scheme just because of that. But the GTX 1080, the performance at 1440p is really good, though. I was really happy to see that the performance numbers are getting to the point where we've had 1440p 144 hertz monitors now for probably a year and a half now, which I would like to get up to that point, but they're very expensive. But anyways, the GTX 1080 can actually produce for those monitors, for those users that have those high refresh, high resolution monitors. I think this is a great solution at a pretty reasonable price point, because the monitors themselves are about $700. So $700 for the monitor, $700 for the video card. To me, that kind of makes a lot of sense, because it looks like that's going to be... I think that's the gamer that this card is really targeted for.
I agree. I can get where you're coming from on that. I guess 1440p, I don't know. That's like a real number, and I don't care for it at all. If it's not... Maybe that carrot was just too well dangled in front of my face, but I want 4K. I don't want 1440p. That's just me. Like 1440p, it just seems odd, and I don't know why. I've never felt okay with 1440p. Don't get me wrong. I know it's better. It's a better resolution, and sure, if you can run a monitor at 144 hertz or whatever, it'll definitely be nice. But I want 4K. I'm not going to even settle for 1440p. And yeah, maybe that's kind of snobbish too, but goddamn it, I want 4K. I don't want 1440p. Well, that's just the way I see it. I don't know why, but I've never had any interest in jumping up to 1440p. It just doesn't seem like it's enough of a boost. I want large, if not double, the gain in resolution.
Well, 1440p is double. It's twice as many pixels as 1080. But I understand, that carrot, like I said, all the way back when, the original Titan came out. That was a long time ago. I think that was like at the very inception of 4K. That carrot's been dangled along, and 1440p has really kind of gained in popularity because that carrot is out of reach. And it's always out of reach, and people got sick and tired of that. And they're like, well, look, these high-end graphics cards, they're not doing 4K. But 1440p, okay, that's doable. Yeah, I can live with that. It's still better. I think it's basically just a stopgap measure at this particular point.
I think it's probably for me because 1440p is just not advertised enough. Like it was never put out there as the next big step. If that makes sense. I mean, I never really felt that it was the next, like going from standard definition television to high definition to 1080p. Like 1440p has just never caught me as supposed to be the next big step. It was always 4K. That's just the way I've always kind of felt or heard it. Maybe that's me in selective hearing, reading, whatever. But I just feel like 1440K or 1440p, that is, I'm sorry, is more of settle. Like I'm settling for it. I want my 4K, but I'll have to deal with 1440p, and I don't want to settle. The reason I'm a PC gamer and the reason I love my PC games is because I don't want to settle with my fucking Xbox. I love my Xbox, don't get me wrong, and I play my games, but I want better resolution. I want to be able to play certain games at such an incredible resolution and refresh rate, and I want to feel superior in that sense to know that I'm playing it better than I can get it anywhere else. And 1440p just doesn't do that for me. I want 4K. I want it to be like. And
I think your mindset on that's probably the mainstream opinion of it. I mean, that's just the marketing. You don't have 1440p TVs. You don't have it's just not really a thing.
Right.
So it's just not marketed properly. Although the PS4 Neo, trust me, it's not playing games at 4K at best. It's going to be doing 1440p.
But they'll advertise that it can show 4K.
Oh yeah, I know they will. But at best, 1440p. They're going to use that. That's going to be the next thing. Your 4K TV and on consoles is basically going to be 1440p at best.
Fuck that, because they can barely get 1080p to run right.
Well, moving back to the GTX 1080, now that we've had our little resolution rant. We want 4K, damn it. And we want it at a minimum of 60 frames per second. Okay. So back to reality, because apparently that's just never going to happen. We'll probably get 8K before 4K is running properly.
Right.
Right. Okay. So we had the DirectX 12 performance, the 4K performance. 1080p obviously scales until you hit, your benchmark limits. But I did find it interesting that I did not see anybody using a stock 6700K. I didn't see anybody using anything besides a 6700K to benchmark the GTX 1080.
That's actually a good point.
Nobody is using a 5960X. Nobody's using a 4790K. And nobody's using stock speeds. Everybody, the slowest one that I saw was Techspot, and they were using 4.5 gigahertz. So something's telling me you're going to need a pretty beefy CPU, especially at lower resolutions for this thing.
You mean higher resolutions?
No, lower resolutions. Faster CPUs needed for lower resolutions because you get more frame rates.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll wait and see. I actually commented on one of the Digital Foundry messages there. I want to see if they'll do a video with using more mainstream CPUs like the 2500K, the old Sandy Bridge chip, stock speed and overclocked. Pretty much see if they can do kind of all the big ones. The i5s and the i7s and at stock and overclocked, and see if where's the limit, where's the threshold, where do you need to be to fully utilize a GTX 1080? Because if you're out there and you have a 2500K and you're seeing all these videos about the GTX 1080 going, oh my god, this is the new shit, I should totally buy this, and if it's only going to really net you from your GTX 980, maybe it'll net you 5% increase, if your CPU can't push it.
Yeah, well, I mean,
we'll wait and see. I don't.
That's one of those things. It's since we can't see it, and we obviously don't have the cards to test it. There's no way to know. But I think that you do bring up a good point. Why is it only shown? And it's not. Yeah, like you said, not even the stock 6700, but it says OC each time. So obviously, or at least I would tend to think you're right. There's a reason they're having to do that, and if they should have come right out and said it if there is the reason, but whoever knows, whatever deal they have with Nvidia, that could be part of whatever they're not allowed to say, if there is anything they're not allowed to say.
Yeah, it's just something that I noticed. They don't want to bottleneck their performance on the launch day, or at least the unveiling of the performance of a brand new video card. I can understand that. However, I do find it a little strange that not a single one of these guys decided, hey, let me try doing this on like a 3570K, or just like an old i5, and let's just see how it does. Is it even worth it? Granted, the GTX 1070 is probably more in line for that class of CPU anyway. But speaking of the 1070, so we now have the revealed specs. And
Yes.
and honestly, them coming out saying, oh yeah, it's going to be faster than a Titan X. I don't think that's actually going to be true anymore, looking at these numbers.
Why do you say that?
Well, your core count's down about 20%.
But that's intended. Whenever they switch, the architecture changed, so you're going to get less cores.
I'm
but better
talking
performance.
compared to the 1080. It's 20% lower than the 1080. And
Right.
the memory speed's 30% lower than the 1080. And the actual speed, the processor speed, is down about 10% there. So you're looking at a pretty big amount of performance being chopped off, probably in the neighborhood of 25 to 30%, which is right in line where the GTX 980 Ti and Titan X kind of live. They're about 25 to 30% slower. So is their assumption accurate that it's going to be faster? Maybe under certain games it will be, and I'm sure in the future with driver optimizations it will be. But right out of the gate, I don't think it's going to win every time. It might be neck and neck, but it's definitely going to lose some benchmarks to the Titan X, and I even think to the 980 Ti a little bit.
I don't know. The jump from numbers, if you went from the jump back in numbers, number one, I feel like a lot of that can be made up easily in MSI, Afterburner or whatever you use to overclock your video card. They don't seem like an insurmountable number. Just like with the 970 and the 980, you can really overclock a 970 and get very close to stock performance of a 980. And I feel like the numbers kind of represent that here as well. They look, and we don't know anything about them yet, so it's speculation, but I'm assuming, as this was pretty much true for, the 670, the 770, and, the 870, now the 970, you can probably overclock and get the speeds. So, yeah, maybe stock, it's only going to be marginally better. I think I said that at the beginning. I mean, that was the impression I got. But still, I mean, you're looking at a Titan for $370 and a marginally better Titan anyway.
No, I'm not trying to marginalize its value. I think at $370, it's fantastic. It literally just destroyed Nvidia's current lineup. The whole thing is worthless. If you go on eBay, I did a video yesterday. The 970s are going for about $200. The 980s are going for about $300, and 980 Ti's are going for about $400. They just obliterated their entire lineup. The thing is, I think with the 970 being as successful as it was, it is the #1 graphics card on Steam there. A few months ago, they went ahead and posted that. More people use the GTX 970 than any other graphics card, which is insane when you think about people logging into Steam with like iGPUs, just their Intel graphics card just to check their shit or check sales or whatever. There's still more people with GTX 970s on there. Blows my mind. I think the reason why, I think they're actually making the 1070 significantly slower than the 1080 on purpose to try and drive up 1080 sales, because nobody bought 980s really. A few people did, but most people actually waited for the 980 Ti's. You either went to a 970 or you went to a 980 Ti, and everybody pretty much skipped the 980 itself. And I think they're actually cutting back the 1070 to a point where there's actually going to be a real performance difference. I don't think you're going to be able to overclock it fast enough to make up that 20% difference in core clock, or not core clock, in core count. So, because that's on hardware level. You could overclock it and maybe get it close to a stock 1080 performance, maybe, but getting 20% out of just straight overclock, that's kind of tough. Plus, you got to overcome the 10% deficit that you're already at. So, I think they're really going to hamper down on the 1070. We need to wait and see how it performs in person, but I think they want to actually drive up 1080 sales more than anything this time around.
I can agree with that, and maybe that's the right move. You're right, a lot of people did skip the 980, but here's the thing. I think a lot of people are still going to skip this 1080, waiting for a Ti or the next version of it. I mean, the 1070 is such an amazing value that even if you overclock and you end up 10% less performance than a 1080, that's worth it to save $200 to $300, if you ask me.
Oh, I agree.
So they would have to severely hamper the 1070, almost make it half a card, in order for people to not go after the 1070. And then once the Titan, the new 1080 Ti or whatever comes out, and then sell your shit on eBay, and then put that money towards a new. I mean, that's just the way it would go. I can't really see. That's what I'm saying. I look at the numbers, and I feel like overclocking will make up a large portion of it. Even if you end up a little less, it's just save yourself $200, get 10% less performance. It's not like you're getting 60 frames in 4K anyway, or average anyway, on full ultra. So don't reach for the stars just yet. Get yourself the 1070, overclock the shit out of it, make it stable, whatnot. You'll probably get close, within a reasonable range to that 1080, and then wait for that 1080 Ti to roll out. Boom. Sell your shit, upgrade, get yourself 60 frames per second in 4K. That's what I'd be thinking would be the general way to go.
Yeah, no, I would agree with your line of thinking. And also, to anybody who is a GTX 980 Ti or current Titan X owner, I wouldn't even bother with either of these cards. I would just skip both of them and just wait for the 1080 Ti. That's part of the reason why you buy a $650, $700 video card is so you can literally just skip the next generation because your card will still be viable. I don't see any reason for those graphics cards owners to even consider either of these two.
Well, the only reason I would say consider it is, what could a Titan sell for right now?
Oh God! Well, Titan, you're not getting your money back. Just not.
No, but just
gonna happen.
Off the top of your head, you think what could you sell for on eBay right now?
At best, probably $500 or $600. The only reason why you'll get pretty decent money out of it is a lot of people are going to try and buy these cards cheap and throw it in their system and SLI their current setup. Like if they already have a Titan X, they're gonna want to SLI it and do what I just said, just skip this generation.
So let's say you can get $500 for it. What do you need? Like $50, $70 more to get to a 1080? I mean, and not only are you getting stock performance, it's going to blow your Titan away. You can overclock it, and then you're really going to blow the shit out of your Titan away. So for basically $70, $100 with tax or whatever, you're getting probably no less than a 50% increase in performance if you overclock it properly.
Yeah,
not worth it to me.
Yeah, but I'd say most people aren't Titan X owners. I'd say the more applicable comparison would be the 980 Ti owners.
Oh, you're totally right. I'm just saying, even a 980 Ti, you sell it for
probably
$300 some odd dollars,
about $400.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say you get $400 for it. You sell it. You buy yourself a 1070. Upgrade that. You're blowing away your 980 Ti. I mean, you overclock the 1070, or just pony up the extra $200 or so to get yourself that, or it would be $300. I don't know. I can't remember, and it's late at night. And I'm tired, but I feel like for a 980 Ti, sell it. Go for a 1070. Overclock it. You're going to get performance that outclasses your 980 for pretty much no money, because if you can get 400 or even 350, I mean, you're talking chump change for fairly large performance gains. If you can get close to a 980 performance out of a 1070, and that is obviously still very much speculation. That the jury's still out. We'll have to wait to see what the benchmarks show. But assuming that that's the case, that you can get within 10% of a 980, that's still going to be a 20 to 30% increase over your 980 Ti minimum. And for $20, $50, I think that's worth it.
Well, Joe says sell. I say keep your stuff and wait till later on. I'd say wait till at least Vega comes out, but that's just me.
No, that's a whole other ballpark. We know nothing about that right now, so that's even worse to talk about.
Well, exactly. But I would wait until there was some information before I went and sold my $650 video card for $400. I mean, just thinking about that makes me want to vomit in my mouth. Luckily, I don't have a 980 Ti or a Titan X. I don't buy into the super high end because of the amount of money you just lose. Unless you sold it like 3 weeks ago or right before the 1080 was even announced, you're pretty much screwed. Yeah. So sorry for you folks out there, but that's just the way it goes. All right, well, that's about all I have. You got anything else, Joe?
No. I just, like we talked about, I just want to say, while it looks great, I'm actually not as impressed and overwhelmed as I thought I would be, and that kind of sucks. So I really hope AMD and their Vega really put a hurting on Nvidia, because I feel like part of the problem is that Nvidia doesn't have or hasn't had real competition in quite a while. So maybe that's part of the problem.
Well, AMD people will definitely argue against that, but I think DirectX 12, I mean, me personally, NVIDIA just destroyed with Maxwell. AMD was expecting to drop down into a new process last generation. They didn't. They had to deal with 28 nanometer again. NVIDIA happened to come out with a new architecture that still worked. So they got lucky. But it's a new game. It's a new game, guys. We have DirectX 12 coming out, which AMD does do better in. So It's basically home court advantage for them. It's pretty much their game to lose. That's kind of how I feel about it. It's their game to lose at this point.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, alrighty, guys. This is Chris with the Good Old Gamer. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe, comment. If you think we're idiots, let us know. We'll tell you we're not, but, you know, have at it. And hope you guys have a good night.
Have a good night, guys.